Blocking Heads World. This is Glenn Loury of The Glenn Show. I have not posted in a long time. The holidays and work have overtaken me, so it's been over a month, I think, since I posted at the Blogging Heads site. I'm happy to inaugurate the year 2018 with my first Blogging Heads conversation at The Glenn Show, to be talking with my son, Glenn Loury.
The Glenn Squared Show now.
Glenn Loury the second. Yes, we are Glens on both sides of the screen here. Of Weymouth, Massachusetts, and if I'm sounding funny, it's because I've had dental work done and my teeth are not the same as they used to be. I'm still getting used to that. But you don't want me to take this partial denture out because
this is a podcast, not a horror movie. Let's
exactly.
try to keep. We're not a podcast. Well, a web show. What would you call this? A web show?
I call it a podcast. That's what people call it, although technically perhaps it's not.
I don't think so, because you can see us.
Well, if you download the audio, you can't and listen to it. You can't see us.
Then that's a podcast, although I don't really know what the difference is.
You can subscribe to the audio-only version of The Glenn Show if you want.
I guess that does come with certain benefits.
Anyway, I am Glenn Loury the First, or Glenn Loury Sr., a professor at Brown University, and my son, Glenn Loury the Second.
New and improved version.
Says that he's an improved version, and by that he means that he's to my left politically, especially on the social issues. That's what I think he means. Is that what you mean?
What was it that you said? I'm wiser, more progressive. These were your words, totally taken in the proper context. And you said you had a third thing that you said I was more tolerant, maybe? I don't remember. Something
like that. More in tune with the zeitgeist.
Mm-hmm.
More on the right side of history. More au courant.
I'm surfing the wave of the current cultural more, and you've been toppled in your surfboard, and you have been washed ashore.
All right. There are like 2 generations separating us since I was 40 years old when you were born. So it's to be expected that we would have different outlooks and perspectives. That's not age the only thing that might lead us to have different outlooks and perspectives, but it's not an unimportant thing. So here's my question. Why not accept the fact that we are the 2 Glens here from different generations and extend a bit of respect for the venerable older head who is your father, even if you don't agree with him in every respect?
Oh, I can accord you respect while thinking that you're wrong. And saying so.
Okay.
On Facebook and in public and in this forum.
All right. I'm going to ask you to give some examples of how you think I'm wrong. I know I'm really putting my head on the chopping block when I do so, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway.
I can think of a couple off the cuff. There was this recent brouhaha on your social media page when you posted that article that was about Me Too, but then wasn't really about Me Too, considering that the person who wrote it didn't really seem to understand what the movement was about. And I'm reluctant to get into it, considering that we're 2 men talking to each other.
Yeah, let's not. But the audience should know that it was a woman who was a kind of anti-feminist in her sensibility, arguing that the hashtag MeToo movement overlooked certain realities about the way in which men and women interacted with each other, and that women, many women, perhaps even most women, really desired to have the sexual interest of men, and were not nearly as scrupulous as the activists behind hashtag MeToo might suggest. Something like that. And I saw it, I liked it. I put it up on my page. I said I would have written this article myself, except that I'm a man, and indeed
it's really not your place.
Yeah, et cetera, et cetera. And I was very severely chastised. Some of my colleagues at Brown University took me aside and said that that was the wrong message. This is now my private social media page, okay, but it's not private, of course.
No.
people see it, and it impacts the environment, and it may contribute to a hostile climate for younger women in the workplace. And would I not relent and whatnot? And so while I didn't take the post down, I did significantly edit my comment about it so as not to be seeming to give the endorsement of the same.
Mm.
You know,
Some might term it a half-assed retraction.
I think you just did term it that.
Well, I am the some. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
you are always, I think, reticent, and perhaps that is because of your old age, and one day I fear that I will also lapse into this tendency to accept it when people say, this is how things are, this is how I perceive them, and this is who I am. So this can go from anything from sexuality issues to gender identity. I remember when I was younger and had just come out, one of the things that he used to say to me is, why not be charitable to the people who did not accept my identity, or I think the way that they like to say it is, I don't agree with homosexuality, which is something that a term I've always found confusing, because I'm not sure what there is to agree or disagree with when someone is saying, this is a part of who I am. You can't really say, no, that's not who you are, because you're not in my head. It would be like me walking up to you and saying, you're not an economist, because I don't think economy exists or is right. It's a senseless thing to say. And it's not something that I think or thought that I have to be charitable towards.
Okay, well, absolutely agreement from me 100% on the question of it's not up to somebody else to agree or disagree with the fact of who you are. Being a gay man in this particular instance, you don't need their permission. It's not really up for debate. Charitable, though, could be tolerating. Okay, I'm going to get myself into trouble here.
Yeah.
Tolerating their bigotry is, I think, what you're going to throw back in my face before I even finish the sentence. So, I don't really have an answer to that.
Yeah, let me use more of your words against you. Because another thing that you would say at times like these is that we are winning the fight and that we can be charitable in our victory. And I don't think that that's so clear. If for the first time in 4 years, I just pulled up an article right now, just as I saw it on Facebook earlier, that GLAAD did a study, and they found that fewer adults are comfortable with people of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, or queer in general persuasion than they have been. And it's for the first time in 4 years that such a step backwards has been taken. And, there are, I'm sure, are a number of reasons that we could posit why this is the case. I think first and foremost among them is there has been a certain political shift where I think people have become more comfortable expressing their less socially acceptable views because of a certain person who is in a position of prominence who says, quote unquote, what we're all thinking. And now everybody is saying what they've always been thinking.
Though he hasn't said it about gay issues, as far as I know.
No, not he has, but his attorney general has been working to roll back protections. I mean, the very slim protections that do exist for the queer populace, which is sort of an ungainly umbrella term that sort of groups together a whole bunch of groups that perhaps do not belong together, considering that gender, queerness, and sexuality are two different things that are linked but not necessarily joined.
Got it. And got it, as you say, the political environment has shifted in a way that might bring some people, if you will, out of the closet in their anti-gay sentiment.
In their hatred, yes.
Yeah, I I don't think that refutes my position that we or you are winning. I think the shift in the culture. I mean, I've been around a while, Glenn. I grew up in the 1950s and the 1960s. We could cite the Supreme Court's ruling in the gay marriage area. We could cite what's going on in popular entertainment and the normalization of same-sex relationships in literature and media and so on. I think the opinion polls will hold up the position that people are vastly more tolerant than they were a generation ago. I think younger people of your generation and the maybe 10 years older would be 3-1, 4-1, maybe even 5-1, accepting and tolerant, so on. So I mean,
I don't disagree that that's the
yeah,
case. I would say that that's not the time to get comfortable. That's the time to keep pushing. Because I would point, in what is not a perfect analogy, to the issue of race. Because I think that what has happened is that people got comfortable. And a lot of people assume that racism is over. And then all of a sudden you see this influx of young men, young white men, like the men who marched in Charlottesville, the man who recently threatened CNN and one other group, for being harbingers of fake news. And so let me actually get what this guy said. CNN.
okay.
Hang on. What was this? Well, I can't find it right now, but there was a gentleman who had, a young white gentleman who had attacked CNN among very racist lines. And so my point is this.
Attacked with words? Attacked in something that he said?
Attack with words. He made threats on people's lives. I mean, he was arrested and then he was let go. Nothing actually happened to this. But my point is that when you get comfortable and assume that the fight is over, that's when these kinds of thoughts are allowed to creep back in. When you start teaching in the history books that slavery was a comfortable arrangement for black people, or as it was phrased in a history book in an article that I read recently, that Native Americans moved out of the land to allow settlers a chance to flourish. It's sort of obscuring history, allows these things to fester.
You're all over the place, but that is the examples that you given are,
Well, I'm using it to draw a metaphor to why I'm not going to rest on my haunches in terms of gay rights just because gay marriage is now legal. It's still not a protected class nationally. There's that Supreme Court case that's yet to be decided about the cake makers who didn't want to make a cake for a gay wedding.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of this civil rights struggle, this new civil rights struggle, that is more important than is gay marriage legal. Because that question is, do we deserve to be protected, a protected class, in the same way that race is a protected class, in the same way that religion is?
What principle would you use to limit the extension of protected class status? Are there any groups that you would acknowledge in society have an identity, but that you think would not be entitled to protected class status? What about Southern or Eastern Europeans? What about Jews?
Jews are a protected class.
I'm not so sure about that.
You can't deny someone service in your restaurant because they are a Jew. You couldn't have someone walk in and say, "Can you make me this Hanukkah cake?" and say no because you disagree with Judaism.
I actually don't know if that's right.
Pretty sure that's right. Hang on.
Protections against religious discrimination, but I don't know.
I'm pretty sure.
Italians, Poles, Catholics, should they be a protected class from the point of view of discrimination law? Or maybe they are, and if
They
I'm
are
wrong,
because
I'm
it's
just
a
wrong.
race. It's a race, religion, color, or national origin. People over 40, people with physical or mental handicaps. So national origin covers your Italians, your Eastern Europeans, your Northern Europeans. Religion covers
No,
Jews.
no, it doesn't cover ethnic Italians born in the United States who are American citizens. They don't have any other national origin.
But I don't even understand what that would look like. Like what? Give me a scenario. What's happening here?
Okay. Um, what's happening is I'm noticing a wealth gap between two different population groups, neither of which is defined by race or religion, but they do have an ethnic definition. And I'm saying that whereas the black white wealth gap might get a lot of attention in the press, the Jewish Italian wealth gap, if there exists one, and I speak of people who descend from and identify as Jewish Americans, Italian Americans, wouldn't get the same degree of scrutiny, or we wouldn't even know what the numbers are. No one
Well,
would even collect the data.
let me answer that for you because federal protected classes include religion or creed, which I believe covers like Jewish identity, irrespective of religion, and national origin or ancestry. So Italian ancestry. It's not necessarily being from Italy,
All
but
right.
being Italian. You can't discriminate on someone based on that. And so the question is adding sexuality to that list.
I wasn't opposing that. I was asking what your principle was for deciding what should and should not be protected, and I was looking for examples of something, and you correct me in saying that national ancestry is already protected.
Yeah, so I guess what I would say is to discriminate against someone based on something that is part of their identity that is not a choice or is not harming anybody else. So it's different. Like, so let's say this case from a few years ago where this guy wanted to name or did name his child Hitler, and ended up having that child taken away from them. He was claiming that he was being discriminated against because of his Nazi identity, which is different because the core of that identity is the idea that white Christians are superior to other people and that it is okay to harm those other people that are different from you, which is very different from saying it's okay to take away the child of somebody who just happens to be married to another man or to another woman.
Sure. Well, I predict that that domino will also fall. That is the domino of having a homosexual, gay, lesbian, bisexual identities protected against discrimination alongside of gender, race, religion, and so on.
Well, I mean, it's hard to say now that we have, instead of Merrick Garland on the Supreme Court, we have Neil Gorsuch? Gorsuch?
Sounds it's Gorsuch, I think, but that's not something the courts decide. That's what a legislature would decide.
I mean, but it's being decided by a court right now. That's the case that's before them, and that.
Oh, that's a religious freedom argument, isn't it?
But I mean, what could be determined by this case could be in any number of things. The argument could be made that, oh yes, sexuality is a protected class, and that's a claim that could be made, and that would be made into law by that.
Okay. All right. Be a little bit generous. Why should you be generous toward homophobes?
I haven't heard a good reason yet.
I said that in the context of the church that I used to belong to and attend. a relatively conservative Protestant African American congregation who were biblically oriented and therefore inclined toward, a conservative or evangelical Christian position on gay marriage, and it was not a progressive position. And what I wanted to say about those people is that they're wrong, but they're good people. And I didn't want you to write them off as bigots because they had the wrong position on a matter of great importance to you. But they were conservative, religious practitioners of a creed that viewed homosexuality with skepticism. I wanted you to look past that and to see the decency of these people. And as I said, you're winning. They're really not a threat to you. You can afford to be generous. That was my position. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, I'm just saying, in this country where people, I mean, this is again not something that threatens me, but the most endangered people in this country right now are blacks, trans women, who are regularly murdered because of fears that are born out of no small part religion. And so while it may be that the vast majority of these people are good people, but these views aren't just held by these good bigots, these nice people who hold bigoted views. So, I mean, I will agree with you that it is complicated. But I don't think that just because they are, for the most part, nice people, doesn't mean that in this one area they aren't bigots. Both things can be true. Or if you prefer a word that is less charged, let me try to think.
I do. I mean, bigotry suggests hatred. It suggests malevolence. I could see a person not being hateful, not wishing ill, not wanting to hurt, but simply
love the sinner but hate the sin.
But
because I believe the definition of bigot is technically a person who is intolerant towards those holding different opinions. So my opinion is that as a gay man, I deserve my relationship to be recognized legally by the state, and they are turning towards a book that is several thousands of years old to be intolerant towards that opinion. I'm standing before them and saying that I am a human, and this is an important part of me. It's not by no means the only part of me, but it is a key part of me. Right now I'm sitting.
Why isn't your reaction to them an example of bigotry as you just defined it? Intolerance of someone who holds a different opinion.
I'm not being intolerant of their opinion. I am recognizing their right to hold that opinion, but their opinion is wrong because my opinion is not about them. Their opinion is about me. My opinion is that I have the right to be in this country and have the same legal protections of anyone else, and that me and the person that I love get to enjoy their opinion. That is my only opinion. Their opinion is that I do not.
Some of them. Most of them are just saying, hate the sin but love the sinner, and they're thinking of it as a sin.
But what does that mean?
It means I don't approve of the way that you're living, but I believe that you're just as much beloved of God as am I.
But that manifests itself in saying that we should not be able to be legally joined by the state.
It does, and that's been stricken by the courts. But I hear you. That is definitely an imposition upon your freedom of pursuing life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I mean,
and my point is that rights that are accorded by the courts are fragile. And given that the person who is currently president is president, the nature of that court can change. Decisions can be reversed and undone. Nothing that is granted forever. And to say I should be generous to these people because we're winning and because we've won is not necessarily the case.
Okay, how about this? How about the idea that politics is not all of life? That there are people who believe in going to war when wars are going to lead to the deaths of large numbers of human beings, and there are arguments about going to war, and we can differ over them, but at the end of the day, we can still be fellow citizens. We can still have a kind of mutual respect.
But this isn't just about politics. This is about me. Politics has a tangible effect on my life and people like me. You can't just say it is the privilege of someone who this does not affect to say politics isn't all there is, because this is something that has a direct effect on my personal life that it would not have on someone who can just sort of say, well, this isn't all there is.
Well, every issue is going to have environmental issues directly affect people. Regulations of industry directly affect people's livelihoods. International trade policy directly affects people. A person who has been displaced by a foreign, provider of the product that they manufacture could say about trade policy. They could take the personal stance that you just took. What privileges your particular interest along this dimension vis-a-vis the interest that all of us have in the policies that touch our lives? Everything is personal at that level.
Absolutely. And, that is why this is so complicated. And I can only speak for what my personal interests are. I can't speak for everybody.
Yeah.
Just like you can't speak for anything other than what your personal interests are and what your area of expertise is. But that doesn't stop you from offering opinions on everything else.
I got plenty of them.
I know. I've heard them.
Okay. We were reviewing areas in which your wisdom and connection to the zeitgeist and standing on the right side of history and progressive sensibility were to be contrasted with my more retrograde and questionable points of view. One of them had to do with #MeToo. Another one had to do with whether or not to tolerate people who were reticent to extend equal regard to the way of life that you might pursue as a gay man versus heterosexual. Are there other areas of waywardness and error into which your father has stumbled?
I'm sure there are. I can't think of anything specific right now. I'm sure if I went on your Facebook page, it wouldn't take me too long to find something.
Okay, well, I'm not a big fan of the Black Lives Matter movement.
I thought you might bring that up.
I didn't endorse the NFL players taking a knee. I think that Ta-Nehisi Coates has got his head up his butt.
I agree, but I think we're coming from opposite sides.
Yeah, you're on the Cornell West side of that argument?
Yeah, I'm on the Cornell West side of that argument.
I'm just searching around for stuff. I'm a neoliberal. I think capitalism's a pretty good system. I think it's made us rich, not just here in the West, but throughout the world.
Because 84% of the wealth made in the last year went to the richest 1% of the people. So who is us? Because I don't think us includes the vast majority of the people on this planet.
Oh, I think it does. I think us is a peasant who moves from a village into a medium-sized city and whose income goes up by a factor of 5 or 10. He used to scratch a bear living out of an arid piece of dirt, and who now is able to drive a vehicle and have air conditioning.
You're talking about people who don't exist. You're talking about hypothetical things. I'm talking about very real numbers about income equality. The wealth gap in America is growing larger every single year. For the first time, life expectancy in this country is going down. But if you separate it by wealth, the life expectancy of the wealthiest people in this country is going up. So the poor are dying faster.
Hold on, give me a chance here. I understand that there's inequality. Okay, what I'm saying is that the system. I was trying to give an example of areas in which I took views that you might disagree with, and I guess you're showing that to be the case. The system of capitalism has empowered us to live at a higher level, us being pretty much everybody on the planet, including the hundreds upon hundreds of millions of Indian and Chinese who have become much more prosperous as a result of the the emergence of their economies.
But I'm saying the numbers don't support that.
Don't support that these people are more prosperous, that the poverty is down, that China is growing at leaps and bounds, and that hundreds of millions of people
China
are being...
is growing at leaps and bounds, but I mean, pollution is also being spread into its atmosphere. I'm sure don't have the numbers in front of me on what their income inequality numbers look like, but I would be very interested in knowing who is prospering, because I think it is a very select few who are actually enjoying these benefits that you claim are being spread to everyone.
Yeah, and I think it's a vast number of hundreds of millions who are enjoying benefits. Are not, vast fortunes, but benefits are vastly improved lives, longer life expectancy, higher quality of life, lower morbidity, greater consumption, less malnutrition, things of this kind. And I'm saying that's a result of capitalism in the first instance, and that alternative ways of organizing the economy could not be counted upon to produce similarly beneficial results for large numbers of people.
I mean, I think that by its definition is not true because, let's see. China and income equality among world's worst. This is from the Financial Times. Poorest quarter of households own just 1% of the country's total wealth. That's interesting. Yeah, China's Gini coefficient for income, widely used measure of inequality, was 0.49. The World Bank considers a coefficient above 0.40 to represent severe income inequality. The figure for the U.S. is 0.41. South Africa and Brazil, also capitalist nations, are higher at 0.63 and 0.53.
You don't see any. Do you see any socialist nations on that list?
Nope.
Well, you know why?
Because their income inequality is less.
No, because there are barely any socialist nations left on the planet.
Yeah, I'm saying just because the system has taken over, capitalism isn't working, is my point. It's not working I can't hear you. Your audio just cut out.
Oh, how about now?
Yeah, I can hear you again.
Okay. Come on, inequality is not a refutation of capitalism. It's an impediment or a defect, but it's not. The fact of inequality does not in and of itself to demonstrate that capitalism, because it's compared to what, Glenn? Compared to what?
I mean, you're saying that there are no socialist nations, but I don't think that that's the case. There are nations that have integrated aspects of like what a socialist milieu would be into the capitalist construct. I'm not saying throw capitalism out and build from the ground up, but I'm saying where we have this system in our country specifically, where people on both sides of the aisle are saying that single payer is never going to happen because they're both being given large amounts of money by the health insurance industry, that they're not. One of the ill side effects of capitalism is that the people who are in power work to increase the wealth of themselves and the people who have invested their interest in them and no longer represent the will of the people. If you look at what is the most popular choice of healthcare in this country, it is the single-payer system, but it's not going to be adopted because it's not something that they want. And I know I sound crazy right now because I think if you stand outside the system and you point out the ways that it is broken, that you're always going to sound crazy. But I don't think that doesn't make it not true.
So you're a fan of single payer?
Yeah.
You think the minimum wage should be higher?
Yep.
You think universal pre-K is the way to go?
Mm-hmm.
You think there should be a guaranteed minimum family income?
Mm-hmm.
You don't think people should be asked to work as a condition of receiving public benefits?
No.
Do you think people have a right to employment? That the government should provide a job as a last resort if they're not able to find jobs otherwise?
I think that would be the ideal way to do it.
Uh, okay, that's a coherent social democratic / progressive vision, and there are countries that approximate it, Scandinavia and so forth. You think that can work in America, and the only reason it's not happening is because fat cats are using their money to rig the political system?
I think at every level of American government and American life, wealth is used to justify the opinions of the people who hold it. So everything has been privatized. Our prisons are privatized. Our military is rapidly becoming privatized. It's hard to see, I think, when you're standing in it, exactly how broken this country has become. And I think the election of Donald Trump is just the latest symptom of the steps that we have taken along this path. Barack Obama was another step. We got the financial crisis of 2008, and none of the perpetrators of that financial crisis were punished in any substantive way. Instead, they were protected by Barack Obama's Secretary of the Treasury, who came from those institutions and was a friend of those institutions, and who, I don't know, either persuaded or Barack Obama was fine with it all along, of protecting these people because we thought that they were too big to fail.
This is Timothy Geithner. This is Timothy Geithner that you're describing. And I think what he and Ben Bernanke and others who were instrumental, Larry Summers, these are economists who advised, Bernanke was head of the Fed and Summers was in the White House advising Obama, Geithner at Treasury. They were concerned about the larger implications for the economy of a potential collapse, of sort of domino falling over collapse of credit drying up because of the implications of a serial bankruptcies if financial institutions go under and there are, claims on each other, and so the insolvency spreads because Mr. Jones owes me money and he just went bankrupt, so I can't pay my debts kind of problem. They were concerned about that leading to a potential Great Depression type economic collapse, and they did what they thought they had to do. The house was on fire.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's an argument to be made there, but I also think if the house is built on a rotten foundation, there's also an argument to be made for letting it burn down and building it right this time.
I don't know about that, man. 25% unemployment for a decade. I don't think our democracy could take it this time around.
I don't think our democracy is taking this. If we look at, I believe recent evaluations of our democracy in several states has it as being something that doesn't really exist. I think North Carolina was a state that was chosen for that. I don't know. I don't have the answers.
Let me shift to a brighter note here. I mean,
Okay.
What are you optimistic about when you look around in the world, whether it's politics or the arts or culture or whatever? What makes you smile when you think about it? What's going on these days?
Well, my creative life makes me smile.
Well, there you are. Okay, talk about that for a minute or two.
Oh, because I just recently self-published this book of mine last month, a collection of short stories.
What's it called? What's it called? And where can people
What
find
Death Can Touch? What Death Can Touch? It's a quote from a poem by a name who's a man whose name escapes me, which is kind of embarrassing because it's one of my favorite poems, What Death Can Touch, by Judah Halevi. And it's a collection of stories that are about a variety of different things. I guess one of the themes that I like to write, the themes I like to write about most are love and death, which is what that poem is about, and sort of how those two things are sort of inextricably linked. And I also, right now, just started a Patreon to help fund my longer creative projects that I'm working on, because I am trying to finish a novel this year. So, I mean, if you're asking me, what do I see out in the world that makes me that makes me optimistic? It's the reaction to the election of Donald Trump that I see, not from politicians necessarily, but from the people in this country who, for the first time, are being proactive and trying to take control of determining the future of their own country. So one of the reactions to Donald Trump getting elected was we've seen an unprecedented amount of women, and particularly women of color, running for office, not just congressionally, but at the local level. We see people who are trying to take back the direction of this country that I think has been led astray by people who have lost the thread. So if you ask me what makes me optimistic, it's that we've come so close to rock bottom that people are waking up. Another thing that makes me optimistic, we see, if you look at movies, so the Oscar nominations just came out.
Yeah.
Get Out was nominated. This makes Jordan Peele, I want to say, the 5th black man nominated for Best Director. We have Greta Gerwig being, I think, the 4th woman nominated for Best Director. So we're seeing an unprecedented amount of diversity, and it's crazy that this is the unprecedented amount of diversity that we're seeing. I mean, we're not even talking about Asian and Hispanic people who have been nominated for Best Director, because that's not a thing that has happened yet, I don't think.
I see.
But steps are being taken, and that's really all that you can start with, are steps.
Okay, what death can touch? That's your
What Death Can Touch. Glenn Cartman Loury.
Where can people find it? The second. Glenn Cartman Loury,
They can find it on Amazon. If they type Glenn Cartman Loury the second, I'll pop right up. If they just type in Glenn Cartman Loury, they'll have to scroll past some, dusty books about finance or race and social inequality or something like that. And then they can get to the good stuff, which are my books. I have 3. What Death Can Touch is the most recent. It is the best. And it is available both on Kindle and on paperback.
Okay, commercial.
At a reasonable price.
At a reasonable price. People ought to take a look.
They oughta.
Yeah. So have you seen 3 billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri yet?
I haven't seen it yet. I think I'm going to try to get to it this weekend, because a lot of people are talking about it.
I assume it got a lot of nominations. I haven't checked out the nominations yet.
It did. It got probably the second most, I want to say. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay. Woody Harrelson and Sam Rockwell got nominated alongside Frances McDormand.
Very well deserved, if you ask me.
I think Frances McDormand's going to be heading towards her second Oscar win, which is good. I love her as an actress, so I always like to see her flourish.
She's scary good in this movie, and so is Harrelson. Okay, people should go see that movie.
Yeah, I will. I'll give you my thoughts once I do see it.
Okay. I think it's time to sign off, my son. We barely scratched the surface. Next time we talk, we should have an agenda prepared in advance, and we should... Oh, we haven't reviewed Donald Trump's first year, but then I think I know what you're going to say. Is
there a grade lower than F?
No, I don't... Well, I suppose we could invent one.
F minus, G,
yeah. The
H.
lowest, I think the lowest conceivable grade, whatever your scale is, lowest grade possible.
J, K, let's just give him a Z. Get right to it. there's been nothing good about Donald Trump's presidency except how it has exposed what has been there all along. Someone said they were in reference to Jeff Flake's sort of empty opposition to Trump, loudly speaking against him while voting for his agenda. Jeff Flake doesn't really stand against what Trump believes in. What he opposes about Trump is that he says the quiet part loud.
Jeff Flake is history. He's on his way out.
He's a flake, so it makes sense.
All right, so we have a topic for our next conversation, and that is, is there anything good to say about Donald Trump? I think I'll come up with 3 things and allow you to refute them.
Yeah, because there's nothing good to be said about Donald Trump except that he will not be here forever.
Okay, so we have something to talk about. Thanks for coming on the Glenn Show, Glenn.
Thanks for having me, Glenn.